style over substance guy. I think we claim a lot of people. We claim like Zack Snyder is that, but even Zack Snyder has ideology. It's a horrifying ideology.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Baz Luhrmann just has nothing but style.
No, I mean I saw his Great Gatsby, and I was kind of like, well,
just
that was...
imagine that with music.
Imagine that with not just music, but really terrible renditions of pop songs during the belly buck.
Ewan McGregor is a wonderful singer.
He always sounds like that.
Anyway, welcome back to the Hack Fraud Show, everybody. We're back and we're talking about a couple of modern Spielberg movies.
Yeah,
we undertook this venture in an attempt to wash the bad taste of Ready Player One out of our mouths.
It did that because Ready Player One is a different level.
Yeah, I was going to say, yes, it did that. It maybe left a different, not entirely pleasant taste, although I did like one of these movies quite a bit.
I do. I think I agree. I think we know which one is which.
Yeah. The other one was a little bit more riddled with problems.
There's a lot to talk about, including I think the master is human. I think we're learning. There's certain more so than like the Vidiot style. Oh, he can't do endings.
Right. Yeah. Spielberg. It's weird when you get into some of his, B-tier work, which I think these movies kind of are in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It's kind of strange for as big as they are. It's kind of they are that.
Yeah. But I mean, Spielberg doesn't make any movie that's not some level of huge now.
He really doesn't make blockbusters all that much. I think like Ready Player One's one of the first like true like blockbusters he's made in a while.
Yeah, he doesn't really make blockbusters anymore, but his movies always have kind of a grand scale to them. I mean, even something smaller like The Post.
Yeah, The Post got like the awards buzz,
right?
And
that has an opening scene in Vietnam and whatnot, and he can really wheel out the...
At Bridge of Spies, nothing happens, but still this Cold War epic that gets nominated.
Isn't there a scene in that movie where, like, a spy plane, like, crashes into Russia? Like, don't we see that happen?
Yeah, that does happen. And there's, like, an entire, like, stage tribunal where, like, the little pilot is put up in front of the communists and he can't understand what they're saying.
I almost feel like I need to watch that movie again, because I saw it and then kind of walked out of the theater and never thought about it again.
No, I really like it. I didn't do that.
I remembered liking it though. Maybe I should give it
It's an interesting cold. I am curious now what it seems like now that we're even more so in a Cold War Part 2, and sort of what that looks like.
Yeah, I would imagine it only plays better now.
Probably, yeah. Though then its kind of major thing was, is it torture bad guys and things like that.
Right. Anyway, we'll get into Minority Report and War of the Worlds. We'll deep dive into those in a little bit, but first, a little bit of what we've been watching.
Maybe featuring a certain someone who's in the background. Want to introduce yourself, Brenna?
Hi, I'm Brenna.
Hello. And you're gonna be something of a referee for this, but
okay.
We shall go into what we've been watching.
Oh boy.
What's on your list? I'll let you start.
Okay.
I'll let you start.
I've got a few things.
Interesting.
So, I saw, finally, I've been meaning to watch this forever, almost watched it a few times, finally saw it now, Billy Wilder's Double Indemnity.
Ooh.
Which I liked quite a bit.
Okay.
I was a little, it's a bit of just kind of a standard kind of boilerplate noir kind of thing.
I want to say I've seen it, but I'm not quite sure. Some of like these more like run-of-the-mill film noirs just kind of like bleed together.
I mean, I wouldn't call it run-of-the-mill. I mean, the setup actually is pretty interesting because what happens is Fred McMurray plays this insurance salesman who meets up with, oh God, who is the actress? Oh, fuck. I had it in my head and now I don't.
I'm looking it up right now.
She was in that Sam Fuller movie that I saw, 40 Guns. And Barbara Stanwyck, that's her name. Anyway, yeah, he meets up with Barbara Stanwyck. They kind of fall for each other, even though she's married. She's in kind of a loveless marriage where it's an older man who has a daughter of his own. And they decide, well, it's mostly Fred McMurray's idea, but she kind of runs with it, to bump him off and claim the insurance money from his life insurance policy that he sells him in secret. Very fun setup. Edward G. Robinson is also in the movie. He plays Fred McMurray's supervisor. He's a lot of fun. it's Billy Wilder. It's a very tight script. It's set up very well. I believe I would kind of like periodically like check where I was in the movie.
Yeah.
And the acts line up almost exactly with like the 30-minute markers of the movie.
Yeah.
Like I checked like at 30 minutes, like at the end, it was like right at the end of the first act. It had been exactly 30 minutes. End of the second act, it had been exactly an hour. Although the movie is a bit longer than 90 minutes.
Well, it's 150, isn't it?
It's an hour 50,
Hour
yeah.
50.
So
the
ending
which
is
a
little
longer for like this era.
Yeah, the ending is a little bit drawn out, and I wouldn't say it loses steam, but it kind of like just kind of plugs along to the end, and kind of, I don't know, the momentum isn't quite sustained all the way to the end, but I did enjoy it quite a bit, and the filmmaking is good. I mean, Billy Wilder, he's an excellent director, he's an excellent writer. He's not exactly super stylish, but I think that there is a lot of good stuff in this.
There's always been like The Apartment and like Sensible. They've always had enough style. Yeah,
I mean, he plays with cinematic style in a lot of different ways, and this movie's a bit more standard, but still very good.
Here's the thing, like, for a while I would have called myself a film noir fan, but I think more and more I'm just learning that I just really liked Carol Reed and Orson Welles. but like film noir is still fascinating, and I'm still always fascinated in the sort of like the big noirs that we bring about every noir member, it seems.
Yes, I'm sure we will wheel those out again.
Certainly.
There's a lot more kind of lower key ones that I would like to see at some point. Anyway, I watched the movie Young Adult. Do you know anything about this at all?
I know nothing about the movie Young Adult.
Okay. Stars Charlize Theron.
Ooh.
It was written and directed by the same team that brought us Juno, a movie that I like a lot and that you hate a lot.
I do not care for it.
Yes. Anyway, written by Diablo Cody.
Yep.
Directed by Jason Reitman. I think you would like this movie more. I'm still not sure you'd like it much.
There's just a lot of like dated 2000s meringue just covered. Just Juno is covered in, and I assume this doesn't have quite. Yeah,
this movie eschews that. It eschews some of the kind of hyper stylized Diablo Cody ease that Juno kind of traffics in.
Yeah. Though Diablo Cody does seem to be one of the few unnamed writers that you can actively be like, oh, that's like a person with that's a writer with a distinct style that we can see.
I mean, you still get flashes of it in this, and I think she has a really good talent for really well drawn characters that kind of sneak up on you in a way. So basically the premise of this movie is Charlize Theron plays this I believe her character's 37. She lives in Minneapolis. She comes from this kind of small suburban town in Minnesota. She gets an email notification that her ex-boyfriend, from end of high school, into after high school, who is played by Patrick Wilson, who you may know from Watchmen and from season 2 of Fargo, who I always love. Anyway, he has just had a baby with his wife, and she... her life has so dead-ended. She writes these she ghost writes these young adult novels that are part of a series that is coming to an end, and she decides to go back to her hometown and try and win her Patrick Wilson back. Now, Charlize Theron in this movie is a reprehensible character, and the movie is very clear-eyed about this, even though it does kind of adopt her perspective. I mean, she is the protagonist, and that's very clear. I would not say the movie lionizes her at all. I think that the movie is very, very I say, clear-eyed about what a terrible person she is and kind of what a terrible thing she's doing by trying to literally break up this guy's marriage and reunite with him.
Yeah, well, I think one of my issues with Juno is I'm not quite sure they had enough clarity around that character, at least for my taste.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could kind of debate it a little bit because they do kind of muddy the waters a bit with it in a way that feels intentional, though. There's a scene toward the end of the movie where kind of she has a conversation with another character who is kind of Charlize Theron is I don't know, everybody else seems so happy and I'm not, and the other woman is no, everyone in this town is fat and stupid. Yeah. And it's a very interesting scene that kind of changes the frame of the movie, but complicates things in an interesting way. And then there's another wrinkle added to the movie with a character played by Patton Oswalt, who was savagely beaten in high school because these bullies thought he was gay. and they like beat him so much that he still has his legs like still aren't quite working. He walks with a cane. There's a lot of hay about how his penis is kind of also messed up, but he's an interesting character to kind of add into the mix, and I really liked this movie a lot.
Okay.
I think that it's an interesting perspective on kind of the struggling artist, you know, who left the small town kind of feel.
It does sound interesting. I'm not too sure. Like, given my issues of Diablo Cody, as like I don't think she's a bad writer. I'm just not fond of her style.
Yeah, it has fewer of the trappings that something like a Juno has, but I enjoyed it a lot. And they all three, Charlize Theron, Diablo Cody, and Jason Reitman, they have a new movie out that they all did together, which I've been meaning to see and haven't yet, which I'm hoping I'll get to see this week.
What's it called again?
It's called Tully.
Tully. Yeah.
It's basically Charlize Theron plays a mother, and it's apparently kind of a modern motherhood kind of movie, which sounds really interesting.
They have Charlize Theron going for them.
Yeah, they do. And then I finally watched Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line.
Is it better than Saving Private Ryan?
I would say no.
Okay.
But I did like it a lot. It's a very different movie.
Yeah, I mostly say that as a joke because it's very there's not two directors who are more apart.
Yeah. I mean, well, they came out in the same year. They deal with similar subject matter and whatnot. This movie, centers on the Guadalcanal campaign. Just stars. It's an embarrassment of riches of actors. I'm sure, like, the famous thing about this movie is that he cut a few people out of the movie completely.
And they were pissed.
Adrian Brody's part was reduced significantly. George Clooney's in the movie for, like, a minute at the very end. John Travolta's in it for, like, 5 seconds. It's just a crazy roster.
I don't get how he was able to do it.
Well, it was his first movie in 20 years, and everybody wanted to work with him.
Yeah.
It seems like he's one of those directors who, like, everybody wants to work with, and then almost nobody wants to work with again after they have worked with him. Anyway, this movie, it's long. It's, kind of languidly paced. For the first 40 minutes, things are being sort of set up, and there's some interesting stuff, but not a lot happens. And then for the next 45 minutes, it's entirely one battle scene, which is very, very, very well done. Incredibly staged and shot in so many ways. Like, the pyrotechnics of it all are just really incredible. And, the actors are all giving it their all. The movie deals with, like, the politics of the battlefield and, kind of soldiers' perspective on war, which works pretty well. It has all kind of the Malick touchstones, the shots of nature, the ethereal voiceover, which, based on what I've read, like, seems to have been something he just kind of put in at the last minute in Badlands and Days of Heaven to kind of stitch everything together.
Oh, interesting.
And it seems to be a thing that he is now, like, fully embraced. So I don't know what the deal is with that, but
maybe he just found out he liked it.
I guess so. Anyway, I liked this movie a lot. It's another one where, towards the end, it maybe starts to run out of steam a little, just because, like, you're in the thick of the war for so long, and then that all kind of slows down. Okay. Yeah, but I did still enjoy it a lot. Sean Penn is really good in the movie. Jim Caviezel is actually allowed to give a performance in this movie.
Oh, was he now? And he can act.
Yes, he's quite good. Nick Nolte's in it as, like, a colonel. He is very good.
Interesting.
I think, like, his character maybe is kind of like the centerpiece of the movie in some ways. Maybe not the centerpiece, but he brings a lot to the table.
Well, Nick Nolte's a big performance, no matter what movie is it.
It's true. And this is not really an exception.
No.
But very good. I would recommend this movie.
Yeah. This is one of those I don't really keep a list of movies to watch, but like this is one that's kind of been in the back of my head. Like, I'm a World War II buff. I kind of need this.
Yeah.
I'm not really a World War II buff, but I know a lot about World War II, and this is something I kind of just need to see at some point.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach. And then, lastly, I just want to talk about this briefly. I've started watching the TV show Mad Men, which I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. It's kind of hard to tell. I think it's one of those shows. It's more similar to something like The Sopranos than The Wire or Breaking Bad, which are those two are kind of my preferred vein of, like, prestige drama, where they're kind of more novelistic and serialized. This is much more like, a collection of short stories. Each episode is standalone, although there are, like, running threads, and obviously the characters are consistent week to week. It is good. I mean, the You know, it's got great production value. All the
Mhm.
period detail is impeccable. John Hamm is doing great work. All the actors really are very, very good. I'm just, I don't know. Again, like I kind of fell off of Sopranos just because like I'm not as fond in my like kind of prestige drama shows
where it's kind of like short stories, episodic.
Yeah, well, and the point of that is, I think, to be more character focused, but like, I don't know, I like something like The Wire or Breaking Bad where the story construction is like very tight while also having great character work.
Both of those shows have really, really iconic characters.
Right, yeah, totally. And, you know, this show, again, much more focused on, you know, getting you into the character's headspace and showing you kind of who they are gradually. I think I'm going to keep going because I do want to see where it goes.
It's one of these iconic things.
Yeah, certainly. And also, just I have a feeling this will kind of go away as the show goes on because these are the early days. Yeah. But there are quite a few, like, in the early episodes, like, hey, it's the 60s. Like, you know.
Yeah, I've always, from what little I've seen, like, very little of the show, but from what bits I have seen, it kind of feels like when you like go to like a diorama store and you see like the house of the 60s, and it's like one of those things where like it's kind of like these like cherry pick things, like, oh, it's 60s, like, oh, look at like what life was.
Well,
and, like,
yeah, it's like more like the things the characters say. Like again, like I think the production design and all that stuff is actually like very good and like,
oh yeah, it's gorgeous show.
Subtle in some ways, whereas the dialogue is kind of like, oh, look at this thing they just said about women. Look at this thing they just said about Jews. It's the 60s.
Yeah.
But I don't want to hold that too much against it because I think that clumsiness will kind of go away, at least based on what I've read. Anyway, so that's Mad Men. I may continue to report in on it as I go. But, John, what have you been watching?
Oh, sweet Jesus. Okay. One of the things I watched, and I probably should have talked about this last week, but we watched this movie for our, like, Alex and Matthew's weekly fuckfest. Where we play video games and watch terrible movies. And what we decided to do was to watch The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because I remember the last time I caught eye of it, it was when, this was back when I was still a roommate with Alex back in the dorm, and it came on TV, and we were just laughing so hard. Because it was just atrocious in so many ways.
Well, it stars Valerian himself, Dane DeHaan, who has been given so many chances and has completely fumbled all of them. So I really don't know. I think maybe Valerian was kind of the last straw for him in Hollywood.
Yeah, I guess, like, is there an actor's jail, I suppose? We keep talking about director's jail.
Oh, there's certainly an actor's jail.
Well, I think this kind of put Mark Webb in director's jail.
Yeah.
But it concerns Andrew Garfield as a 30s-looking Peter Parker. Like, say what you will about, oh God, how much?
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland's actually really good. I'm talking about the early one. Sure.
Oh, Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire, like, he always acts like a child. Like, sometimes you just read child from him, which is so weird when he tries to act like an adult in movies.
Right.
Which is why, like, Baz Luhrmann's Great Gatsby is also just so weird.
Yeah.
But in this, he just, like, they aren't even trying, but it's like, oh, he's still trying to figure out his life. Oh, he's graduating from high school. Oh, and you just buy none of it.
Yeah.
And this movie's, when it first came out, people really made fun of it because it had fucking 3 villains in it.
Right.
It was like...
so soon out on the heels of Spider-Man 3, everyone's main complaint about that movie was that it had too many villains.
Too many villains, which it just seems like God. Those complaints just seem so quaint now. They say it had too many villains. They say it was unfocused and did too much of world building for the other movies. And goddammit, this movie looks like Gone with the fucking Wind compared to what's in cinemas right now in Avengers Infinity War. There is a subplot with Peter's father that which ultimately goes nowhere.
No,
but they at least repeat it sometimes. And the strife with Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy that is repeated, and there's actually kind of closure to it almost.
Well, yeah.
Almost.
Because they kill her.
They kill her, yeah. It's a bad way to do it, but it's closure in some way. Like, the villains at least have, like, some motivation that isn't, what can we have a motivation for a genocidal maniac in 3 minutes? And so, in some ways, it's more of a movie than, say, Avengers Infinity War, but it's also far more terrible.
Oh, yeah. This movie is preposterous.
This is, I think, I do hold this up as the worst superhero movie ever made. Like we always bring up, like, Batman and Robin and all that shit, but I don't think anything is quite as atrocious as this.
Well, because this movie is, like, uniquely positioned as this weird, like, midpoint between the camp of something like Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
Like, Jamie Foxx, like, what the fuck is he doing in this movie?
Christ, like, coming out, like, the guy was in Django Unchained. You think, like, you think he'd be Hollywood royalty. You think he wouldn't have to do this, but here he is giving one of the worst villain performances I've ever seen.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. And then it's a midpoint between that and then, like, the weird moment where everybody was trying to get on the cinematic universe bandwagon.
And then there's the entire, like, room. There's just the room
of villains.
Where you see, like, Doc Ock's arms.
I'll never forget living through the whole, like, Sony PR machine of, like, them trying to construct the Spider-Man extended universe.
Weird.
It was so bizarre. You'd hear, like, stuff like, oh yeah, the Sinister Six is coming.
There's gonna be 6 movies.
There's gonna be 6 separate villain movies. There's gonna be a Venom movie. We're making a Black Cat.
Oh my god, yeah, you're right!
Like, is she in this movie, by the way?
No, she isn't.
No, I think she is, though.
Wait,
like, I think they cast people and have cameo appearances in this movie
minute.
that were intended to be, like, things that would pay off later.
I think you're right.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah, because I guess it worked for Marvel. I also think the world-building stuff in this is actually not that much worse than what Marvel actually does.
Oh, no. Well, it only looks worse because none of it actually paid off.
Yeah, because the movie just died, and, like, they just didn't make another one. But, like, it sometimes looks good.
Well, yeah.
Mark Webb is a filmmaker, and sometimes you're like, that's a decent action scene. Like, that's a decent-looking a set piece. Like, Gwen Stacy's death, it kind of looks good as the stupid fucking, like, web hand thing.
Yeah.
But, like, it's kind of iconic almost. And I'm like, I wonder if, like, someone like this could still be making superhero movies. But then the script happened.
Yeah.
And this is, oh my god, the Green Goblin.
Man. Man.
It's something. Paul Giamatti's in this for, like, 2 minutes to give the worst performance he's ever done.
I don't know what happened there. I just, like, I mean, yeah, the whole thing with, like, Mark Webb is actually pretty good at, like, all the relationship stuff.
I remember we were watching, I'm like, this kind of looks good. Like, this, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone have chemistry. Like, there's something here, which is more than what I can say for most Avengers movie, to be honest.
I guess. It's not a movie I ever want to watch again by any means. But
oh hell no! It's also like you. In some ways, it's like the funniest fucking thing in the world.
Yeah.
Like, because it's just like it is just such an abortion in so many ways. Mm-hmm. But it's also just really boring sometimes, especially the stuff with, like, Peter's father that just kind of goes nowhere and runs out of steam.
Totally.
He also goes underground and finds Roosevelt, and, like, he goes to Roosevelt's secret station and finds Peter's dad.
Yep, that's a thing that happens in this movie. I don't know. It's so weird because, like, this movie was not, like, a disaster in terms of box office.
No,
like, it did really well.
It did kind of well. And,
but, like, it was such a failure creatively that it just, like, scuttled all of Sony's plans. And that's kind of one of the rare instances where that happened.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, if, like, because, like, the thing about, like, the Russo brothers aren't filmmakers, but, like, they have some idea of what a film kind of should be. And, like, Marvel has some idea of what people want. Like, their idea of just these movies just kind of make them funny. And so, like, they have some idea of what puts butts in seats.
Right.
But the thing about, I think this is what I would use as leverage against, like, this is what these things are, just with less tact. Like, this is just kind of... I think the problem with it, the people just started seeing the machine laid even more bare than you get in Marvel movies. And they were just disgusted by it. It's kind of like when you tell people about, like, unpleasant design in cities.
Right.
About, like, when they put, like, bike racks where homeless people used to sleep. And they're like, hey, what's this? But I guess Marvel is just better at forcing homeless people to go away. This is a torture metaphor. I'm going to stop. So I think there's something in this movie that I think there's something to be deconstructed here about, like, what about Marvel Disney has been able to sort of, like, capture the imagination, and why this was such a failure creatively, and it is really reviled, so much.
Just to put a button on it, I just think it's because, like, Marvel was very gradual with how it built up all this stuff, and I mean, if you look at it as a whole, I mean, the way they planted and paid things off worked okay, even if it was, like, a totally misbegotten, like, you know, cinematic exercise.
Yeah, here's the difference, like, Captain America, like, is still a movie.
Right.
Like, some of these things are still movies at the end of the day.
But, yeah, well, Sony just tried to make it a rush job, and in much the same way that DC, you know, did.
Yeah. But DC was working with more characters, so...
Right. Well, yeah, DC just kind of, like, plowed ahead and, you know, did whatever they could to make it happen.
Including bringing in a Joss Whedon.
Right. But anyway.
I'm going to put a pin in that. It's the worst superhero movie ever made.
All right.
It's a fascinating one.
Sure.
For all the wrong reasons. But the next movie I watched was... I don't know what to classify this. Is it a cult hit?
Maybe. Yeah, well, it might even qualify as, like, a regular hit. I think it was nominated for some Oscars when it came out.
Was it? Brenna, do you know about this? Was Moulin Rouge nominated for anything?
It made a lot of money.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the pop art musical.
It was nominated for 8 Oscars, including Best Picture.
Did it win any, though?
It won Best Art Direction and Best Costume Design.
I did not like it. Well, I think, like, people complain about Baz Luhrmann a lot just because he's stylized, but the problem with Baz Luhrmann, I find, is that he's not very good at style. I think that's the issue of it. First of all, he has no idea what any of it means. He just kind of likes it.
His style is just a lot of style that doesn't really contribute to anything.
Yeah, like, there's just, like, in this movie, there's just a lot of, like, manipulation, just compositions, like, dynamic irreality, just fucking, like, speed it up, slow it down, like, more than that, like, here's the thing about it, at least Zack fucking Snyder at least shoots in slow-mo, like, this fucking Baz Luhrmann just slows down 24 frames per second film. I'm like, what do you do this a lot, why, is it that hard to shoot in a higher frame rate? I am perplexed as to why this was a creative choice that they returned to. But it's a musical that has no original songs.
Yeah.
It has one original song. Check yourself.
What's its name?
Come What May.
When did that happen?
Their secret love song.
Which one?
Just continue.
Oh, okay. Well, this is one of her favorite movies.
Oh. Oh boy.
Actually, no, Brenna, I'm going to stop her. I'm going to say, Brenna, why is it one of your favorite movies?
It's a cute movie about overcoming obstacles for the sake of love.
It's not very good at that.
It does that.
Because, well, what's Ewan McGregor's name in this? Christian is, he's kind of like a cartoon character whose sole purpose is to give kind of goofy reactions to all the weird shit going around him, including, like, this weird-ass, like, bohemian trope that touts out the phrase beauty, truth, and love.
Right.
Which means nothing, just like the rest of the movie. And, like, there's this idea of, like, like, these bohemians against, like, the aristocratic norm represented by one of the worst performances I have ever seen in the form of the Duke.
The Duke.
Is that Jim Broadbent?
I think that is Jim Broadbent. Or is that Jim Broadbent?
I don't know.
I'm looking it up.
Look it up.
No, it's not.
I think he's the one who runs
the guy from Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Harold.
Yes.
Yeah, he runs, and he's the only one who's allowed to be a character, because, like, he's like, well, Jim Broadbent is actually good at, like, gurning at the camera and being really silly, and that kind of works. He also is given more depth, because everyone is just, like, these shameless cardboard cutouts, but there's just not an ounce of irony, neither in, like, plot construction or in sort of stylistic construction. Like, the style of it is just to amplify just how artificial it already is, which is very different from what, say, Wes Anderson does with his, like, rampant over style, we could call it. And also, everyone can't sing. Like, it's auto-tuned to hell. Like, they just throw in these pop songs. They all sound terrible. It all sounds like they spent like 15 minutes in a recording booth and just had them like blurt it out and then just put it in. And the blocking isn't all that. Well, actually, the blocking is sometimes good. The problem is like the frame is just so utterly cluttered and it's so quickly edited. There are so many edits in it.
This is consistent with what I've seen of the movie, which is not much, to be clear.
Yeah, and you probably only saw like that Lindsay Ellis.
Yeah, I've seen clips there and some other places.
Yeah, but it is a movie with ADHD in all the worst ways. And as someone with ADHD, I couldn't even follow it. So, like, I just, that's my problem, is I wish it was about things, but it's a really basic love story that doesn't really add anything, which wouldn't be so bad, but, like, there's just not much chemistry there. There's not really much of a dynamic there, because there's so much montage in the movie as well. So it's just it's almost confusing, despite it being so simple, but, like, it's artificial in, like, a really annoying and really grating way. So I just did not have a fun time with it. I don't think it's invalid. I don't think it being stylish is invalid. I just think it's not very good style. And just fucking shoot slow motion, Baz Luhrmann.
Okay, so my question is, they recently adapted it for the stage. It's coming out soon. Do you think it being live would be better because it wouldn't have all that shitty editing?
I kind of don't care, but if we get on that, the songs are still terrible.
I'm just asking about the editing.
Oh, the editing. I mean, that'd be one thing fixed, but like it's still terrible. It's still light.
Well, if they could get people that could actually sing,
I guess
that would help.
They have like Aaron Tveit is the lead. He's a pretty
I
always like him.
Yeah, I guess like if the question is like, could you hand this to like a more talented hand and get something from it? I think very much yes. Like, if you could get someone who could, like, grasp the kind of, like, the fact that they are dealing with papier-mâché cutouts and really play with that and really make it a style over substance in a way that makes it an interesting and livable world and not just, like, noise coming at the camera, just blurting, screaming, gurning.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think yes. I guess I could like a stage adaptation of this. Thank you for bringing that up.
If I may, I don't want to like play into any gender-based stereotypes here, but
certainly.
I just want to say I don't think I've ever met a male who actually likes this movie.
Do you know any males who like the movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Two of my good friends from home, we actually watched it together. They both.
Interesting.
All right. Point disproven then.
I will say it is something of a. Actually, I'm not too sure it's much of a female movie, because there was a point where Ewan McGregor pretty much assaults the main lead, throws money on her on stage, and says, "I've paid for my whore."
Okay.
Which is just awful and misjudged in every way.
Saying that out of context makes it seem a lot worse than it actually was.
It's equally as terrible there. Especially, he does it on stage during a performance. There's a full theater to watch him perform this, like, act of sodomy.
They all think it's part of the show.
But it isn't?
No.
Oh.
I'm gonna move on from this. Because I feel a battle I do not wish to indulge in coming out. But thank you, Brenna, for your opinion. I am very glad that you found joy in this movie.
I'm not gonna say anything else about that.
Okay, then. Are we ready to get to Steven Spielberg movies?
Yeah, let's do it.
Excellent.
We watched two of Steven Spielberg's early 2000s big budget movies, both starring Tom Cruise. I think these movies kind of make an interesting double feature because, like, in both of them, he's kind of dealing with, like, post 9/11 themes and visuals and keynotes in a lot of ways. Like,
yeah, there's a lot. Like Minority Report is in many ways kind of a Patriot Act movie.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I think War of the Worlds kind of became like the 9/11 movie, partially because it wasn't about 9/11. It's like explicitly.
It draws on kind of the imagery and kind of the feeling of 9/11.
Yeah, that's sort of like we need to invade Iraq. We need to do something irrational to get back.
And all that. Yeah, and what was I going to say? Fuck. I hope it'll come back to me.
But do you also mean kind of like that, like post 9/11, like stylistic choices?
Well, sort of, but well, okay, I remember now.
Okay.
Anyway, I think maybe like the movie like might have had more impact at the time because like now we are in this phase where like blockbuster movies have been like drawing on 9/11 imagery for like the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And
well, they usually do it terribly.
Well, yeah. Oh no, I'm not saying they do a good job, but I'm saying like I think maybe the 9/11 imagery that he does use in this movie, like, may have had more impact at the time.
Yeah. Well, I just remember, like, there's a point where we, in the War of the Worlds, we just see New York.
Yeah.
Just a skyline. There's no Twin Towers. There's no anything. I just, like, is that even shocking for, like, an audience then? Just to see, like, here it is, a big blockbuster movie. You're used to seeing, like, skyline New York, and two things that are usually there just aren't.
Well, I guess we might as well just go into War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
One of the things I kind of liked about this movie was that in its universe, 9/11 has happened. Like, they talk about the terrorists. You know, that's a phrase that comes up a lot in the movie. They
talk, we are attacked.
Right.
It is an invasion.
Yeah, we are, and well, like, you know, the actual 9/11, like, it seems like did happen. We're in New York City. I think in one of the shots of the movie, I noticed like every house has an American flag. Out front.
There's a lot of like jingoism.
Right. So this is very, very consciously like a world, like our world. 9/11 has happened. We are in a post 9/11 world, and
I think also something. I think there's also something to be said about like terrorism as like TV spectacle.
Yeah.
Because like anytime like when like especially when the aliens first come, like everyone like gathers around. Like even when it rises up and it's clearly like a weapon, they're just kind of like looking at it, going, "Oh, the spectacle! Right. Oh, the tragedy! Oh, we're still watching."
Right. So the plot of this movie is very simple. I mean, Tom Cruise plays. Got your all-American dock worker Tom Cruise.
Oh yeah, he's just a
your
member of the working class. He's there throwing New York sling around.
New York longshoreman Tom Cruise. Now I love Tom Cruise. He does not read as a blue-collar New York longshoreman in any regard.
But he does read as a father who doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
Oh, certainly, yes. So basically, set up in this movie is, you know, father Tom Cruise and his kids flee alien invasion. That's pretty much the entire plot of the movie.
Yeah, with some 9/11 imagery sprinkled in here.
And of course, Spielberg's classic, you know, broken family setup. You know, Tom Cruise is divorced. He's struggling to connect with his kids.
This is one of the daddy issues movies.
Yeah. And then alien invasion happens, and you know, he is kind of struggling to rebuild his relationship with his kids as he is trying to flee these very hostile, very aggressive alien weapons.
The movie's structure kind of becomes Tom Cruise becoming a good father means survival. That sort of becomes the plot of it.
Right. And, you know, for a lot of the movie, that really works.
There's, especially like, some of the action scenes in this.
The action scenes are really well done. And that first scene, like where the first kind of tripod comes up out of the ground, and that whole thing.
It kind of comes out in stages. It's almost like watching Jaws, almost.
Right. Yeah. Slow reveal. Like Spielberg is great at constructing things like that, and then just the turn on a dime into just pure like horror movie, disaster movie terror.
Like, the body horror in this is really good.
Yeah, like I mean, it does have that kind of MPAA dodging, like bloodless death vaporization, but it kind of works for the movie.
But like, they're using blood to terraform the Earth.
Well, you get into that later.
Yeah, which is like this horrifying thing. But
that whole thing comes up. Yeah, that whole element. Yeah, that works really well.
Yeah,
that's a genuinely unnerving thing that you kind of don't get a lot in Spielberg movies.
Yeah, he kind of, sort of to say, like...
Well, past a certain point, anyway.
Yeah, I don't want to call Spielberg a kid's director, but he's always for, I think, what the what like the French way would have called like tasteful cinema, like the sort of like thing. Like you are delighted by Spielberg. You are never repulsed by Spielberg.
Right, exactly. And another thing I really appreciated about this is that, like, I mean, this is going to sound strange to say, but it captures really well, like, what I think, like, how humanity, and especially Americans, would react to an alien invasion.
Yeah.
If it actually happened.
Yeah, you're kind of right. There's kind of like this idea of, like, what the fuck do we do?
Yeah.
Like, there's the guy with, like, the shotgun who's like, I'm gonna fight back.
Right.
Like, Mr. Rebel Southernman.
And, like you say, the way they all kind of gather around and are just gaping at this thing.
Yeah, it becomes imminent destruction becomes media spectacle because they're all just kind of just like when the military comes in, like sometimes they're just kind of watching it. They're not really making all that much effort. They come away like the spectacle of the military just kind of makes them stop and look.
Right. And yeah, again, just a lot of it works really, really well. Tom Cruise, I think, is really good in this movie.
He's really good in this movie.
Like that first bit, like when he comes back after that first kind of set piece, and he's like, his kids don't really know what has just happened.
And like he's covered in literal ash.
Covered in like human dust, and he's just kind of shaking it off. Like that is really powerful.
Yeah, like he just doesn't know how to respond. Like, this movie really gets panic and anxiety and terror, and like sometimes like we think we should all be like Dakota Fannings, like screaming all the time, but sometimes like the body just doesn't know how to process it, and it just kind of freezes, which is what is brilliantly portrayed in that scene.
Yeah, and you know he gets such mileage out of just like little character things, you know, as Spielberg does so well. Like Dakota Fanning's whole like claustrophobia ritual that she does with the sun. That was a really cool character beat that I appreciated. Now, all that said, rough edges, let's talk about those.
Yeah, the CGI isn't... I don't want to harp on this too much, because we're going to get into this with in Minority Report especially. But there's just sometimes you go like, maybe you shouldn't have CG'd that. Well, Spielberg, you've done Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Like, you know how to do this.
Well, again, I think that, you know, once you hit kind of the early 2000s and CGI was just like a cheaper... easier alternative. Like, I think especially, like, we kind of talked about this, like, older directors especially seemed, like, very susceptible to this. Because they would be like, oh, we have CGI, well, that's, you know, cheaper and faster than, like, model work, and we can do anything we want now.
Yeah, I think there's this idea in, like, that, like, CGI is slicker, there's something like, this idea of Hollywood as CGI.
Yeah.
To be cinematic is to have CGI.
Right.
And older directors just really didn't know how to translate this. Especially when it is when things are real in this movie, they look really good. Yeah. Like I think like the body horror red veins we see that he starts peeling off.
Yeah,
really good.
Yeah. But again, like, you know, I think Spielberg, it feels like Spielberg was like, oh, can you do this? Can you do it exactly like this? And they were like, I mean, yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure.
And then they did it, and then
he was like, oh my god, it exists at all.
Yeah, and you know, Spielberg is certainly not the only director to fall victim to this.
I don't want to harp on this, especially there is sometimes some actually pretty good CGI.
Oh yeah.
The tripods look incredible.
The tripods look really good, and the design of all that is really well done.
That kind of like, it's kind of like faux H.G. Wellsian steampunk, and also just kind of like modern sci-fi.
Yeah. And, you know, he does do a good job, like, building the character arcs and stuff into this.
The father stuff is, I think, it's one of the weaker links.
It is. Well, his whole relationship with his son is just kind of weird and trite in some ways.
Yeah. Sometimes you're just like, oh, teenage son, like,
right,
not knowing. But sometimes... But then there's like the scene, and like Lindsay Ellis did like a great like 2-part essay on this movie like years back, and she points out like that point where the son says like, "Oh, let me go," makes no sense.
No sense at all.
No sense.
Yeah, I was like, what? Why do you want to do this? Like, I did see what they were doing with like his thing earlier, where he was like, "Oh, we should strike back. We should fight back." That makes sense.
That makes it. That's sort of like infantile. Like, I want revenge. Right. I need closure. I need something, which is like yeah, that's something a teenager would totally think in this situation.
But then to have him be like, have this whole big moment with the swelling John Williams score.
Dad.
that did not work for me at all.
Really, Tom Cruise looks just as confused as like, the audience is like, oh, what the fuck is this? But then Dakota Fanning is screaming in the distance. We gotta bail and run to her.
I don't know. I mean, it didn't work, but I was kind of happy that it happened because it got the sun out of the way.
It means it's out of the movie, yeah. I'm just like, okay, good. We can just go into like the Dakota Fanning stuff actually works.
Oh yeah. No, Dakota Fanning is great in this movie. Like very good child performance, and you know, again, they do a lot with her as a character, really, which is not always easy to do.
They don't do like sometimes this kind of makes her annoying, but I'm kind of glad they don't make her like harbinger of childhood innocence, like perfect. She screams all the time. She's needy. She's always asking for things. It's a kid,
right?
Not just an object.
Totally. And again, like, you know, the whole Tom Cruise's like journey of fatherhood with her, I think, is really profound. Like, I love that whole, you know, the whole sequence with Tim Robbins.
Yeah.
And then the part where Tom Cruise just has to kill him.
Yeah.
Like, which occurs off screen, and then he blindfolds Dakota Fanning and has her like sing a little lullaby. That all works. Yeah. That's an incredible scene.
Just the scenes in the cabin are incredible.
Yeah.
Like, there's some great photography in there. It's suspense as hell. You kind of get Tim Robbins as like, I am Warhawk, I am America, I am Mr. Let's Invade Iraq.
Yeah. Now, one interesting thing about like the look of this movie,
which is like,
well, it's
Janusz Kaminski all over it.
Certainly, and you know you get your great Spielberg style kind of free flowing all that stuff. I always like that. Minority Report does this too, but in a way that feels more conscious. But like this movie has, and I guess this was just like a late 90s, early 2000s thing, because like Bringing Out the Dead looks like this. 25th Hour looks like this. Like just the kind of washed out, like bleach bypass like look of the movie.
Yeah. I remember like there's a scene that's really early on where it's like the mother's just dropping off Dakota Fanning and the other kid. And I just remember thinking like, God, this is really blown out. Like, like I would have if I was on set, I would have said like, hey, Mr. Spielberg, I think we need to do another take. This looks really weird.
I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird. And like you can talk a lot about how Janusz Kaminski has kind of changed his visual style. I mean, for a lot of the movies, it has worked really well.
I honestly think sometimes this movie's really gorgeous.
This movie, it is in spurts, and in large spurts, you know, Lincoln looks great. Schindler's List obviously is incredible. Saving Private Ryan, what they did with that, I think also works really, really well.
I think Bridge of Spies looks really good.
Bridge of Spies does look good, and you know, again, like for a lot of movies, it works. I don't know, just. For a movie like this, it is odd that like he decided to light it and grade it this way.
I think the issue is that like a lot like Spielberg always kind of goes for some kind of like Hollywood irreality. He's not. He doesn't try to be like sort of like we kind of say like dark and gritty, but like that's kind of just code for realism per se.
Right.
So like what you get is like this kind of movie that's kind of like, oh, we have Tom Cruise like longshoreman guy just kind of running away from aliens. But, like, the look of it is just, like, super Hollywoody, just super stylized. And I think there is something of a dissonance there, especially when the movie just doesn't do that. And it kind of just looks like a normal movie sometimes.
And I think for something like 25th Hour, maybe he was consciously doing this as well. I don't know. I kind of, in 25th Hour, I kind of attribute that to, like, Spike Lee kind of, like, capturing the post 9/11 atmosphere in a way. Like, the way kind of, like, New York kind of felt almost covered in ash for a while.
Yeah, I think that might be some of it.
But also 25th Hour has, like, crazy moments. Like, there's a scene where they go into a nightclub and it's just, like, flooded with blue and, like, all that stuff is really kind of crazy. And so, I don't know.
Spike Lee has a bit more diversity when it comes to his nutso-stylism.
Yeah. So, I don't know. With this, the look of it, it didn't bother me. It just did kind of call out as strange occasionally.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things it's one of those, like, notice me styles. It's not like... It's almost like another Wes Anderson comparison. It's almost like that. Like, notice I'm using models. Notice I'm using these things. Like, notice my like camera work.
So just to close it out, let's quickly touch on the ending, which is terrible. Okay, not terrible.
I wish if it would. It doesn't ruin everything. It's just kind of like it's just kind of like this addendum slapped on.
Yeah, it just feels like the movie kind of just peters out, and they weren't totally sure how to finish it.
Hey, Steven, we've run out of digital film. What are we gonna do? Like, oh shit, get Morgan Freeman in here.
And again, like I was saying earlier, I think that this whole ending where like the aliens just kind of get sick from Earth's atmosphere and die. Yeah. I believe that is in the source material. Now, that's not an excuse, but it does kind of explain why they did it.
Yeah, well, the issue, I don't think the issue is, like, oh, they get, like, sick and die. Like, right. I don't think that's a terrible thing.
No, and they do kind of seed it at the beginning, because they have, like, the movie starts, like, on the weird little microbes and then, like, zooms out.
But that also kind of feels like an addendum as well, right. Like, slapped on.
But then they also have the ending where the family unit is successfully reunited, and the son, who seemed to perish in a giant explosion,
impossibly shows up,
is back and alive and fine, and the whole family unit is successfully together again, despite the fact that Tom Cruise's wife is married with a new husband who does not appear in the end of the movie. No,
it's just so that also feels slapping. It kind of feels like Spielberg was like, shit, I just made a movie where we see, like, an ocean of, like, of blood. It's... Okay, I can't really kill off the son. I can't make it too sad. We kind of gotta give them... They're, like... in a movie kind of about, like, not having closure, this movie oddly, like, wraps up to get closure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Past a certain point, it always kind of feels like Spielberg is trying to, like, make you feel better in some ways. Like, he makes these... And it goes back to, I mean, this is something that people bring up a lot, so we won't go too deep into it. Because it's been covered far better in other areas.
In a better podcast.
Vidiot's, did a whole episode about this. But, like, you go back to, like, Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, which are very tough, like, brutal movies.
Yeah, like, you literally see, like, them liquidating camps in Schindler's List. You see Auschwitz.
Right. And then they have... endings that almost feel like Spielberg is trying to leaven the material.
Yeah, like, especially like you have you have kind of like the framing device of Saving Private Ryan, where we see like the teary-eyed old man. In Schindler's List, you have the family members and putting rocks on the grave.
Right.
It's those kind of like...
Well, okay, I mean, the rocks on the grave thing I like, but like...
I don't have an issue with these things, but these are like these kind of like bookended, like, let's kind of memorialize this. Let's kind of make this less something that feels like it has closure when it actually doesn't.
Right. Well, the one that people always bring up from Schindler's is the scene where he, like, goes outside and starts crying about, I could have done more.
20 for this pin.
Right. Which, I haven't watched that movie in a while. Didn't really bother me when I saw it.
That doesn't bother me at all. The rocks on the grave bother me a bit more. Just because it is such like this, let's celebrate the dead. It's even more saccharine than like the 20 for pin.
I suppose. But I do kind of.
That's a different movie, but this sort of has like that same sort of like.
The point is with War of the Worlds, he doesn't need to like. There's no historical reason to do that, and yet he does it anyway.
Yeah. Well, there's a historical reason, the Holocaust, but that's beside the point. Yeah. But, like, this is the sort of movie that, like, a lack of closure would be a really great thing for your 9/11 allegory movie.
Totally.
And it just doesn't. Right. And it's also just bright sunlight. Yeah. And so it turns orange in a way the rest of the movie just isn't. Yeah. And it is just so weird from a stylistic standpoint. And it really does feel like it just came out of nowhere, which I think... Like, if they had seeded any of the ending, like, so, like, showing the aliens be, like, progressively, like, slower and a bit more, like, sickly. Having the sun come back, maybe not at the fucking end, and maybe not having that weird-ass let me go scene.
Yeah.
But, alas, this is where we are. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but I think this movie is still successful.
I think so, too. I liked it a lot. It gets some really, really great stuff in it, and, like, some surprisingly, like, dark stuff from Spielberg.
Also, like, fairly nuanced filmmaking. Yeah. Like a kind of, like, nuanced or, like, under-the-radar score from John Williams, which you just don't expect.
Yeah. No, so I enjoyed this movie a lot, and I think it's got a lot in it worth recommending. So, so we like War of the Worlds.
Yeah, I think it's, like, if you're really interested in the kind of, like, the post-9/11, like, what America did, this is actually a pretty decent, like, case study of that.
Yeah. But let's move on to Minority Report, which
2002 was
2002, yes. Yeah. So this is another movie that like was a big budget vehicle. Tom Cruise again.
Big, like, high-concept sci-fi
right,
thing.
Based on a Philip K. Dick story.
Mm-hmm.
And, very clearly in this movie, Spielberg's kind of dealing with the whole Patriot Act, surveillance
Patriot
state
Act,
thing.
Patriot Act, civil rights, like some kind of torture allegory.
A little, but it's more focused on the surveillance stuff, the intelligence business.
Yeah, especially with the little bugs they send out.
Yeah. So basic premise of this movie: Tom Cruise is the head of the pre-crime division in Washington D.C., which stops crimes before they happen, based on the visions of the precogs, who are these. Not magically, they do have some technobabble about it. But
I think they're kind of just like science experiments.
Yeah, these almost X-Men like.
That's a very good way to put it.
Human beings who can see the future.
They are X-Men characters trapped in a Philip K. Dick story. Right. We'll put it that way.
Now, it's weird that like they attempt to like define the parameters of the precogs abilities.
There's a lot of technobabble in this movie.
But then they kind of like go outside of that in some ways. Like they talk about how like, they can only predict murder, they can't predict rape and stuff. But then they have scenes later where like the precogs are just like telling Tom Cruise about future events, and that was a little bit strange.
I'm just kind of like, okay, like what exactly what are these things like? And they aren't really allowed to have character by like the nature of the story. So I'm kind of like, what even are they? Like, I don't even think we get like a good shot of the faces of two of them.
Well, no, because only one of them really matters at all.
They explicitly say that too.
They do totally. And anyway, Tom Cruise is basically implicated in a pre-crime and has to go on the run. And it's this whole twisted kind of noir-style whodunit story.
Yeah, like who framed who?
Right.
Where's the corruption?
Right.
So like, there's like bureaucratic overreach going on because like, and also like, the precog system is going to go national. And all that.
Right. So there is a lot of stuff in this movie that I did like a lot. I think
the look of it is sometimes really good.
The look of it is interesting. I mean, this movie, people make a lot of hay about this like being kind of Spielberg's noir movie. Yeah. Which it has kind of those trappings, but like the visuals of it like read less noir-y to me than just kind of like...
It looks more like AI.
Yeah, well, it's got that like kind of, glass door future, washed out.
Yeah, well, they literally go into the precog, like, center, and literally it's all, like, glass and, like, metal, and and there's this giant glass screen that they work with, and they look through.
I guess they did the desaturation thing to kind of, like, beef up the contrast a bit, which works in places. In other places, it's just like, this is just overlit.
Other place, I'm just kind of like, I'm just looking at Washington. What are you doing?
Right.
Oh, no.
Well, I do like other things I like about this. Like, I like that they set it in Washington, kind of against this bureaucratic backdrop. I think that provides a nice little subtext to the movie, although it is laid on pretty thick.
Oh, yeah. They lead the kids through on a little tour in the courtyard. The precogs are never wrong.
Yeah. I do like the precogs, kind of. I'm so up to a point. Like,
okay.
That whole set piece where, like, Tom Cruise is taking Agatha through the mall and she's kind of telling him what to do. I liked that sequence a lot. That was just a nice little propulsive Spielberg set piece.
I kind of like some of the society in this and how, like, everyone's being bombarded with ads and, like,
love that.
And also...
This movie was very prescient about targeted advertising.
Oh, yeah, certainly. And then also, like, I really like the scene where they kind of talk about, like, they call it the temple, and they kind of talk about, like, hey, what kind of priests here? And they're like, what? This is kind of, like, all on blind faith. And, like, that's something that's kind of just dropped by the wayside, but I'm glad that something like that is there. Yeah. And actually pretty eloquently commented upon for the kind of movie that it is.
Yeah, and again, like, there are some good, like, just sequences in this movie. Like, the opening I thought was really
cool. I was kind of like, I'm sold, Mr. Spielberg. Take me on this magical ride.
Totally. And I think that's just all very, very well done, and it kind of throws you right into things. Has a bit of the Inception problem where from there it just kind of downshifts and, like, people are explaining things at
for a
little while.
It is always about like, oh, that's not the rules. Like, oh,
right.
they're
and
like,
it's kind of like
what happened.
It's kind of like, did we need this? Like, we just saw exactly how the system works.
Yeah. I'm just kind of like, okay, like, why do we need so many fucking rules at the precogs? Like, if you would just showed us them and just showed what they could do, I don't think we'd give a shit about like, the sort of like, oh, we thought they could only do murder and that sort of thing. And, and there's also just kind of like the way this is kind of spoiler territory now, but like the ways they try and like manipulate the precog system make no sense.
It's odd. I mean, honestly, like, yeah, this movie, I think it was weirdly like it's one of his more acclaimed kind of late period movies.
You're kind of right.
I really didn't think it was that great.
No, this was
like there are a lot of like kind of weird choices that he makes in this movie.
It's also way too long.
It's very long.
It's not very well paced.
It's not, and like again, just like so many bizarre choices he makes. Like that whole sequence where like Tom Cruise gets his eyes replaced and Peter Stormare is there just doing a weird kind of campy.
Okay, the tone of this movie.
Oh, it is so bizarre.
I do not know what they're going like. Especially that scene also comes with like Tom Cruise bumbling about, accidentally eating a moldy sandwich, as John Williams' score perks up in the background. Like, there's also a scene where Tom Cruise comically drops his eyeballs and they roll down and they almost go to drape up. I'm like, this is like some kind of fucked up Charlie Chaplin movie. Yeah. What am I watching?
It's kind of like, what are you going for here, Spielberg? I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know either. Because so much of it is trying to be this, like, heavy-handed, kind of trying to be thoughtful, like, Patriot Act meditation. Like, oh, free will, surveillance state, like,
oh, bureaucracy, oh, democracy, la-di-la.
You know, are we giving up too much of our freedoms, that whole thing.
It's oddly far more optimistic than than anything we're seeing, but that's the point.
I do like some of the ways in which he uses the precogs.
I do too.
Agatha as a figure in this movie, once they take her out of, like, the temple, she just becomes that, like, you know, archetype we've seen a million times of, like, the waify, supernatural woman.
No agency, no ability to do it. She just kind of predicts the future. She is just kind of like whatever the movie wants her to be, and nothing more. She doesn't have a character.
You get that scene where, like, she's, like, almost seems to be, like, in some sort of weird oracle ecstasy, describing to Tom Cruise and his estranged wife, like the kind of like what their son's future would have been.
Yeah, I'm just kind of like, what is going on here?
Yeah, it comes out of nowhere, and like the whole subplot, like with the son who has died.
That just kind of that feels like something like recycled from just about like every like Hollywood movie ever made. Like there's like he can't, he either doesn't have children and wants children, or he had children and they either died or they're lost or whatever. Exactly. It just feels like sort of motivation in a can.
The one sort of thing I did like about that was that like it provides like the reason he like is going to kill this guy who he is like. Yeah, the whole pre-crime thing, like when you get to that guy's apartment,
you
and
can see
find
him
out,
from
like,
miles away.
Well,
like, that's
I don't know. Honestly, I kind of was surprised by it, like where it's like, oh, he's the guy who killed his kid. Well, then it turns out that that's all set up, and then that kind of. I mean, if they didn't have that, I think it would definitely be kind of a weird kind of contrivance.
Yeah, like, even by noir standards, it's still this movie just kind of gets like so over complex and over convoluted and just so like.
It does get convoluted in a lot of ways, and
it's oddly pulpy too. Pulpy in a way that, like, we described this before, but, like, Spielberg's style isn't pulpy.
No.
He takes on pulp, like Jaws and, like, and Indiana Jones. Like, that's pulp. That's as pulpy as we can imagine. But he treats these things like they're Citizen fucking Kane. Yeah. There isn't a scene in Jaws of, like, them comically dropping, like, the hunting spear and going, derpy-derpy-derp, what are we gonna do?
Right. It's just so muddled in so many ways. Like, because it feels like he has, like, so many different things that he was trying to cram into this movie. Like, let's make it a noir. Let's make it a futurist kind of.
Like, that kind of works. Like, what kind of visual? Oh, like Patriot Act. Let's, like, throw a lot of that in there.
And then, like, but we'll also try to make it like an accurate future, which is an element that I do sort of appreciate.
Some of it just looks utterly terrible.
Well, yeah.
Like the highways they have in it look terrible.
But again, I mean, this is a Spielberg movie. There is good stuff in it. There's
sometimes really good filmmaking.
There's some really, really good filmmaking. Some of the set pieces, again, are very well done.
Yeah.
That whole other thing where, like, Tom Cruise is, like, waiting to, like, regain his eyesight, and, like, they send in the, like, drone kind of things to, like, scan everybody's eyes. That sequence is really well done, I thought.
Yeah, like those little bug things look awful, but like it's a tense scene. You kind of see the mechanics of it. It becomes a bit of world building because you see everyone's lives getting interrupted by it, and like that's really interesting. So like I think this movie has like interesting things to say about like free will and like the nature of like are we just people that are like condemned by the nature of our surroundings, or do we have genuine choice?
Right.
The movie very harshly comes on the idea that we have choice.
Right.
Like that question is still there.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's ever like as clear cut as like some Hollywood pictures make it.
It is heavy-handed, but I would agree that it's not necessarily clear cut, which I would say is to its credit.
Yes.
Now, this is another movie where the ending has been very controversial.
Yeah.
And my only thing to say really about this is that like the whole theory is that like you see Tom Cruise go into like the weird stasis prison, Tim Blake Nelson seeming to do his best Tom Hanks impression. By the way, did you notice that?
You're kind of right.
Like, I was listening to him and I was kind of like, it sounds like he's doing a Tom Hanks impression.
I was kind of like, that's what I was saying. Like, what is this voice? But I think you put like a finger on it. It is kind of supposed to be some vis-a-vis Tom Hanks thing.
That was just odd,
and he only plays Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring on the organ. Why does he have a fucking organ?
I don't know. Again, like so much of the frippery of this movie is just so bizarre. Yeah. You also have that weird ass guy like who's running that weird like Pleasure Palace VR. Kind of thing.
And that like I want to
like that feels like that character would be played by T.J. Miller or something if this movie were made today.
It's a subplot of the movie that implies somebody's bootlegged the precog technology and made what is in essence a strip club out of it.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so you see Tom Cruise go into this like stasis prison. Tim Blake Nelson tells him, all your dreams come true. They say it's not so bad.
And really loudly, very much. Right. Audience will remember this.
Right,
voice.
Totally. Like in a way that having heard about the ending of this movie was much more obvious than I had thought.
Yeah.
Which makes me think like, okay, maybe Spielberg's intention was to kind of craft this whole
that's
like...
what I was saying. Like the moment I heard that, I'm like, oh, maybe Clay Keller isn't an idiot.
Like, no, I think people who say that are onto something. Yeah. I think Spielberg was kind of maybe trying to do that kind of Brazil ending like thing. The problem is that, like, why then does he not have the thing that Brazil does where it is clarified? Now, ambiguous endings, like, if you want to do that, Spielberg, fine, whatever. But
I think the movie could actually work really well with an ambiguous ending. I think that's a far better thing than what it has.
But he doesn't even build enough into it that, like, goes the other way of, like, this is, like, his kind of stasis prison dream.
Well, that seemed like... I was thinking about this, because I was kind of thinking, like, is, like, him just saying you see all the wildest things, and, like, is that enough? And I just say, no. A filmmaker like Spielberg would do the Terry Gilliam thing of just showing Tom Cruise in the chair, cocked out of his mind.
Yeah, I think you're right. He wouldn't necessarily have to go that far, but, like, he could even have done, like, something like the Blade Runner thing, where, like, you have, like, the unicorn.
Just the unicorn, that's all you need.
Something to suggest a little bit more.
But it's played so straight.
It's played so straight.
I'm just kind of thinking,
like the last shot of the movie is this, like, long, slow, like, Shawshank Redemption style crane pull out of the precogs living happily ever after in this country house.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of like, if this was your intention, Spielberg, you're doing a terrible job showing it.
Right, yeah.
Which
I don't know.
I just do not buy that theory at all, given this exactly what it is. Well, I understand, like, especially, like, that line is just shouted with so much, which I'm just kind of like, yeah, maybe you would look for this.
I buy the theory, but I don't think that there's enough built into the movie to, like, fully pull it off. Yeah. I just think Spielberg maybe, like, had that idea and just didn't quite go all the way.
Maybe it was just something left on the cutting room floor.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe it was one of those things where like they wanted to do that, but then they realized like then they said like, oh, this is going to. It's already like 2 hours and like 20 minutes.
I'd be so curious to like know kind of the history of that and the thinking behind it.
Yeah, especially like the lines behind the movie because like it doesn't. This movie doesn't. I mean, it has the Spielbergian filmmaking all over it, but it doesn't necessarily feel Spielbergian.
No. I mean, it has his flair. Mm-hmm. It has, like, you know, some of his kind of thematic concerns.
Daddy
the
issues.
The whole family thing. I do think that, like, some of his, like, darker impulses that you see in, like, War of the Worlds, and from what I hear, like, in Munich, do show up here.
Yeah.
Like, with the whole, you know, some, like, Tom Cruise's, like, drug habit and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, Munich is not pulpy in any way. Munich is straight-laced. Munich is... It does not have any of this tonal confusion. It is Spielberg being very straight and not having, like, any frippery about it. It is... if anything, it has more to do with, like, Lincoln than it does, like, something like Minority Report.
I mean, I'm hoping to make time to watch that movie, but regardless, I just think that, like, you see his darker impulses in this movie, but then he just kind of pulls away from them so often and goes into his goofier kind of realm.
Far more extreme, I'd argue, than War of the Worlds.
Totally. Like, there's this movie has much more of a tonal whiplash problem than War of the Worlds does, and I don't know. On the whole, I didn't think it was super successful in what it was trying to do.
I think it was. I think it's kind of a mess.
It is kind of a mess,
and you really didn't like it.
I thought it was a good idea, but I agree with what you said, that it was just kind of a mess. Yeah. There's just so much going on, and like the weird subplot about his son that never really went anywhere.
And
Tom Cruise also seems to be doing everything and nothing at the same time, as far as performance is concerned.
Yeah, I don't know. Lots of stuff I like, but overall, it's just too much of a mishmash to really work as a whole.
I think if you are a Spielberg completist, like this is no Ready Player One.
No, certainly not.
Or even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This is still like a Spielberg movie. I was never bored by it.
No, I was not bored either.
I was never bored by it. There's some like really interesting ideas. There's some really good filmmaking. There's sometimes actually really good character, and like there's some really good scenes in it. Like the scene where like he talks to like his dead son through like this like 3D home movie.
Yeah.
Like that's such an interesting scene.
Yeah.
But it also has terrible scenes, like the guy with the CGI no eyes.
Yeah, and Max von Sydow just kind of his whole turn is just I don't know. So this movie is a mixed bag. I would still recommend watching it, especially if you're interested in Spielberg. I think it's a showcase for kind of what happens when he has a lot of concerns that he is trying to squeeze into a movie.
It's an interesting example of Hollywood sci-fi. I think if I were to have like a Hollywood sci-fi like class I was teaching, this would be something I probably should.
This was a big tentpole movie.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of like high concept thing that Hollywood kind of just doesn't make anymore.
Unless like it's Alex Garland.
Right, yeah, I guess. So, yeah, that's Minority Report.
It's something.
It's something. I'm glad I saw it.
I'm glad I saw it too. I'm at least, if anything, just to say like I saw it and I think there's some interesting things to talk about it.
Yeah. So that wraps up our modern Spielberg episode. Yep. We still like him a lot. Ready Player One notwithstanding. I'm very curious to see like what his next project is going to be. There's been a couple different things announced.
I think Ready Player One is the only movie of his where I've just said like, oh, this is awful.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Where there were almost no redeeming factors in that movie at all.
Whereas both of these movies are wildly interesting.
Yeah, certainly. So that wraps it up for this one. What do we want to do next time?
I had an idea, and I'm curious what you think of this. Which is, it's kind of Spielberg tangential. Don Bluth week.
Oh.
Have you? I haven't seen All Dogs Go to Heaven, which is one I've watched.
Okay.
What? It's got... Don Bluth is one of, like, the American animation maestros.
You're right.
He is something of a classic filmmaking symbol. And I think All Dogs Go to Heaven is kind of one of his, like, tentpole movies.
Okay.
This is, like, you can, like, bat any of this away at any time.
Well, I'm I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I'm curious how worthwhile of an exercise that movie would be. I mean, I haven't seen An American Tail.
Ooh. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I'd be willing to revisit it.
I haven't seen Land Before Time in a long time either.
I haven't seen Land Before Time.
Ever?
No.
Oh.
Shit.
All right.
Yeah.
You want to do
An American Tail?
American Tail and Land Before Time?
I'd fucking love to.
Sure.
Make a dream come true.
What, you get to see 2 Don Bluth movies?
Land Before Time and An American Tail? Come on, this is like my childhood.
I've seen American Tail. I've never seen Land Before Time.
I have seen Land Before Time, and I just never saw American Tail. So this is fun.
Yeah,
this is interesting.
And we also get to talk about the man who is the almost Disney.
Yeah, well, the sort of the anti-Disney for a hot second there.
Yeah, he's something of a. He's a really interesting film because he's also like super Mormon, apparently.
Really?
Well, maybe not super Mormon is the way to put it, but he is Mormon, and like there's a lot of Christian imagery in these things. Mm-hmm. And there's also something to be said about like how his movies are just kind of like, I guess, have a Disney Plus sort of like there's sort of like this idea of like children's entertainment that scares children.
Right. Well, I have seen The Secret of Nim, and pretty recently, which is that movie's crazy.
Yeah, that movie's crazy. I love Secret of Nim.
Yeah. All right, so Don Bluth week coming your way. This will be one of our more odd digressions, but I think it'll be interesting
it's
to look
Spielberg
at.
tangent. So
I'm into it.
So I think Spielberg was executive producer on both of these films.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah.
So
all right, so that'll be coming your way. Look for that, and thank you all for joining us.
Excellent.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to us.
Oh yes. Okay,
I'm gonna open up the windows.
All right. Cool. While you're doing that, oddly, I think these movies kind of make an interesting.
Sorry.